welcome to What the Heck's Your Source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 prophecies foretold by the roll of a dice. I'm your co-host, Davy, and with me, I have my always rating co-host, Phil. How are you, Phil?
Apparently, I'm always rating.
Always looking for those right cards, at least.
Yeah.
And I have the Crone's favorite knife, Brian. How are you, Brian?
Sharp as ever.
Doing good. For your context, we are coming at you on the 4th of May. Time has no meaning anymore for me. About 5 or 6 days before we'll release this episode. And we are talking new releases, which Warhammer community gave a little peek on quite a bit in advance, I think. Almost a couple weeks ago now, week and a half ago.
Yeah,
I was surprised how early, but I gave a little peek at the deck and a little peek at this warband, and we're going to give the full reveal on there. As usual, you are able to check out our content for a card-by-card review on our blog. We hit our kind of highlights, the big points here, and you can follow up for a second opinion or a more thorough discussion there. Before we get to that, we'll hit our usual things. Community shout-outs. Phil, you got something you want to shout out?
Yeah, I'll highlight over on the Goonhammer blog. We've got a new article, Starting Hexes, and this one is talking specifically about some of the rationale and math behind different sizes of the different decks. So like whether or not you go over 20 power cards, whether you should just stick to 12 objectives, and then sort of highlighting some of the card draw abilities in the game and sort of how you can leverage those to decide, like, does it ever make sense to sort of adjust the sort of base knowledge of like, hey, always stick to 12-20, which is a nice starter article. I don't think anybody's covered this topic in quite a while. Obviously, the math probably still works out pretty much the same as what it has been for the entire history of the game, but always fun to see somebody else dig into it, especially with a new card pool with some new card draw effects.
Yeah, totally. We have a slew of articles coming from Spent Glory. One of the things that he does on the regular over there, which I really like, is the web highlights. And so that's a great way. It's actually, think of it as this, like the community shout out section, only like bigger and more comprehensive. So he'll shout out things from blogs, from podcasts, some cool painting, and all that. So that's a recurring bit. That's always a good wrap up. So, if you don't get time for anything else, go take a look at that. And it's a good way to kind of spark your interest in, you'll find something that's worth looking at there. And one of the things he does actually mention is something you wanted to shout out, the Cinderfall Gaming.
Yeah. I just, there's such a lack of video battle reports in this game. And so the few YouTube channels that put them out consistently, I think are always worth shouting out. And we have a new one from Cinderfall Gaming. Their battle reports are, I would say, pretty much just focused on highlighting the game in general. It's not like, hey, here's something super competitive, here's like a deep dive. It's just like, here's a game. We had fun playing it. This most recent one is Rippas versus Zickets. And I don't know
if you guys looked at the Rippas warband cards.
I have fought against them once in this edition. Really? Yeah. And yeah, they're not anything like what they they're a little bit like what they used to be, but they're not nearly as scary as what they used to be.
But you can tell that they kind of thought about it, because
they
like
thought about it.
they have two attack profiles on both. They're like, some of them you would never ever use, as far as I can tell.
Nope. I don't think there's a reason to ever want to bite somebody, but
yeah. Me and I might find a reason,
maybe,
kind of, so that because he gets access to a melee attack. Anyway, it's pretty funny though.
Yeah. But I think one other thing that I always find great about Cinderfall is that I don't know who it is that they have on their team, but they always do like hand-drawn art for whatever the battle reports they're doing are, and they do battle reports for like all the different game systems from GW. But I always think that the fighter profiles for their Underworlds ones are really, really great. And like,
Mhm.
I wish we could have that as just card art because they're really spectacular. So always fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that is awesome. We'll do a quick around the horn with what the heck is going on with you, Brian. What have you been up to?
I actually plugged in another community shout out. I
Oh.
forgot that the Calgary Alberta Classic was happening this weekend, and just looked up the results. We saw on our Discord that Matt from Set the Tempo got himself a ticket, and it looks like he got that by the first place spot with Thriceful Discord. So congratulations to Matt.
Wow. Awesome.
And then there was 3 tickets on the line. So second place, G. Guillaume got it with Grandfather's Gardeners, my man.
Okay.
I wonder what he was cooking with that. And then third place was a Josh with Mollog's Mob.
Oh,
Is that
all right.
Bouchie? Bouchie, you dog. It's not. It seems to be the only Josh here, so I'm going to put my money that was Bouchie, and that's awesome. I can't wait to see you at Worlds again, man.
That's cool.
But yeah, congratulations to those 3. We were debating the places that we would travel to this year, genuinely. And sorry, Derek, we couldn't make it. We weren't afraid of the Wolverine pit. We were contemplating it, but there's only so many places we could go in a year with a travel budget. So Congratulations to those guys. And looks, a lot of familiar names there that would have loved to have seen again, but alas, congrats.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of stuff going on with us, I have been all consumed with making a Titan. It's not Underworld's news, but it's been a life goal of mine to have a 40k Titan, and that has been my day in, day out hobby progress. I'm looking forward to cooking up something with these Knives of the Crone, though, because I really like a warband whose war scroll kind of has a whole mechanic unto itself, similar to the Gardeners, and I think the Knives of the Crone offer something very fun in that regard.
Yeah, we'll get into that in just a sec. Phil, you got anything you want to say about what the hex has been going on with you?
Yeah. So I've been messing around with Hexbanes a lot, just trying to find a warband that's fun, and I find the Hexbanes to be very fun. I don't know how good they are, but they're very fun, and they've actually been performing a lot better than I would have expected. Despite
I don't think I've had a game against you with them that was not close.
Yeah, I've only had one game where I lost badly, so they keep it tight most of the time, which is surprising and gratifying, but they do lose a lot. So hopefully going to get some paint on them soon, probably play them at our Q2, just because they've been a lot of fun, and I'm just going to keep jamming something that's fun. How about you, Davey?
Well, on a similar note, I've been messing around with Dread Pageant. I think it was fish mode that kind of copped me to the idea that they might be better than I realized, and certainly they're a lot of fun. They're unlike the Gardeners or Knives of the Crone. They have a whole bunch of little tidbits on their War Scroll card for potentially very powerful abilities that are sometimes gated behind some strange conditions, but when you can fire them off effectively, they feel real good. And they pair nicely with Rack and Ruin, which is a deck I like quite a bit. So I've been messing around with them and enjoying that quite a bit. And we got to kick off our league, so we're a couple rounds into that, which has been good to get back in the swing of things there.
Yeah.
But let's talk about those knives. So for one, we have this is a mastery warband, right?
Yes, they are officially labeled as mastery by GW.
Yeah. We will talk in a bit about whether we think they earn that, but the big overall is that there are 4 fighters there. They have 3 fighters with 4 health, 1 with 3. We'll go fighter by fighter, but as Brian alluded to, there is kind of one one kind of overall main mechanic on their card. I drew a parallel to Gardeners there, which I think is fairly apt. And normally when we kind of talk about a war scroll with a warband like this, we kind of go, we're like, hey, here's the inspire, here's the, like the every turn thing, and then here's what's on the main card. And I think you almost have to do that backwards with this.
Right.
So without getting too crazy into it, and I think most folks, I can't remember what all was shown on Warhammer Community already, but most folks have seen some part of this so far. But the core of it is that they have the ability to foresee the future. It's this kind of prophecy thing. They'll get one prophecy at the start of each round, and then another one can be triggered every time they successfully attack with. Does it have to? It does not have to be a melee attack. It just has to be any kind of successful attack. And It doesn't have to be a successful attack during an action step. If you have some way to trigger one in the power step, hello, countdown to Cataclysm, then there's a way there as well. Brian, do you want to give us a kind of rundown of the prophecy?
The prophecy table?
Sure.
Or are we starting with the rituals of prophecy?
Just how it works. Like what do you do when you try to do a prophecy?
Okay. So the warband's kind of styled after that new character that released last year, the Crethusa, I think it is, where she's like
the
that
Croneseer.
blind. Yeah, the blind Croneseer. Very cool model. So these are some Daughters of Cain witch elves with like black raven feathers. Really cool aesthetic. I really like the models compared to stuff like the Arena that we have seen before. So as far as their mechanic works, at the beginning of each round, and after a successful attack, they get to roll 4 attack dice. And based on the results of those dice, you will apply a benefit going forward. Some of it's offense, some of it's defense, and then there's kind of the mastery aspect, I guess, which would be looking at your objective deck and foretelling what is to come. And you can even control it to some extent by putting the card back on top of the deck or to the bottom of your deck, which I love. And I'm happy to say that this is casting the dice to get this prophecy. You're always going to get a result. And I think that's great because you don't want to have an ability that's kind of like has a dud result where you're just getting no benefit when this is your entire war scroll.
Yeah, I will say the only time that it felt like that when I was practicing, if you roll Foretold Wisdom, and that's like 2 hammers, there's other ways to kind of manipulate the roll, like crits are wild. If you have 3 of a kind, pick any one that you want. If you have 4 of a kind, pick any 2 that you want. Once I had Foretold Wisdom, and I think I had top decked Get Stuck In. So I was like, well, that's obviously staying on the top of the deck. I want to see that. And then I kept on rolling Foretold Wisdom again. I was like, I know exactly what's there. I'm just going to look at it again and put it right back on top. But so that was the only time where I felt like this is not doing anything. But even then, you may be inspiring, which is actually worth describing as well.
Yeah, so I had a similar situation when I was getting Foretold Protection. But I guess we'll... so shall we get into the nitty-gritty of exactly how it's worded?
We don't... we can just say what the 3 abilities are. Yeah.
Okay. So we have... When you roll these dice, you're looking for pairs. And each pair gets you the result for the prophecy table. But if you roll... crits wild, and then if you get 4 of a kind, you can choose 2. If you get 3 of a kind, you can choose 1. So like I said, you're getting something every time. Foretold Slaughter is the offensive one. It is the swords result, and the next time you pick a melee weapon as part of an attack this battle round, that weapon is crit grievous for that attack. I think this is notable. It's interesting because you can hold off on this ability going off I think if you do a ranged attack, because they have a ranged fighter. So I think you can kind of pocket this one.
Yeah, provided you have access to non-melee attacks or want to slow your roll and when you actually make that melee attack.
Yeah. And I think that's relevant because on the opposite side of this, Foretold Protection is the defensive result. This is for any combination of support results on the dice. So that one of the more frequent ones you're going to see. This one is the next time you make a save roll this battle round, you can immediately reroll one save dice in that save roll. Seeing as these fighters kind of start off with just one dodge mostly, this is like what you're really banking on to survive or increase your chances of survival. And as Skylar and I found out, it seems that this will be spent regardless of whether or not it's used. So it can't be banked. And I had a situation where you were rolling Foretold Wisdom repeatedly. I kept rolling Foretold Protection. So like at the beginning of the round, I rolled it, and then I made a successful attack, and I rolled it, and so I had two defensive rerolls banked. But with one defense dice, you're not able to reroll a reroll, and basically he rolled a high enough result where it didn't matter what I was going to get. I couldn't even roll stand fast. And so I couldn't bank these protection rolls, and they fizzle regardless of whether or not you use them. And I was like, okay, so that's the only like real dud result, I think.
Yeah. But I think it's an important one to have on there. I think it takes your defense from bad to okay prior to Inspire, and it takes it from pretty good to pretty great after Inspire.
Yeah, and that's where I think you're desperate to get these fighters inspired, and that happens through Foretold Wisdom. So, as we said, this is the hammer result. You get to look at the top card of your objective deck and put that card on top or bottom of the deck. But not only that, that ties into the Inspire, which is if Foretold Wisdom is foretold after a friendly fighter's successful attack as a result of the Visions in Blood ability, inspire that fighter. So this is where Davy mentioned reading the War Scroll kind of in reverse is helpful here because things are referring to each other. So Visions in the Blood, use this immediately after a friendly fighter's successful attack. Make a prophecy roll. See the Rituals of Prophecy table. Yeah. Which the Rituals of Prophecy table is explaining rolling the 4 dice and what you can do with those 4 dice. And then based on the results, you then go to the prophecy table, you get the results there. So if you get Foretold Wisdom after a successful attack, you can inspire the fighter that made the attack. And I think at the beginning of the game, you are quite desperate to make a successful attack and hopefully roll Foretold Wisdom to inspire the fighter, because going from 1 dodge to 2 dodge is going to really expand the lifespan of this warband, because 3 of the 4 fighters start on 1 dodge and they inspire to 2.
Yep. And a number of them get some decent attack boosts as well with the Inspire. Before we go on to those stats here, Phil, were you on the fighting or receiving end of this warband at any time during practice, or were you?
No,
you were Realmstone practice.
Yeah, I was practicing Realmstone, and we did not pair Realmstone with this warband. Although I think there is potentially a chance to actually do that. But no, we were focusing on a different warband. So I haven't actually not seen this warband in action at all.
I will say of these 3, so Foretold Slaughter is the hardest to get because it needs a pair of swords, which are less common than hammers. With Wild, you often had some fair choice over what you're getting, but between Foretold Slaughter being the least likely to be rolled, and often I just didn't have I'm like, you actually kind of want the reroll on defense a little worse than I want the possibility of 1 extra damage on an attack. I don't know if I ever triggered in the 2 or 3 games of Foretold Slaughter once, one way or the other. It was nice to know it was there, but it was like I just kind of don't have the bandwidth to make time for it.
Yeah, I can say in our practice game, I was very much leaning on Foretold Wisdom to get the Inspires, and Foretold Protection, you're just kind of praying for those defenses because they can fall pretty quick. There was some fun narrative to Skylar and I's game, but once I did trigger Foretold Slaughter twice, and both times it did do the extra damage, and like it was a fight where I was definitely losing fighters faster than Skylar, but I was getting damage out, and that was really nice. It was a little like it was a little counterintuitive because I was picking. I thought it was so desperate to get these fighters inspired that I was picking targets based on who was the easier target and more guaranteed hits, so that I'd get the successful Visions in the Blood attack to trigger the prophecy roll.
Yeah, I think pre-inspire, it is a pretty easy decision if you have any agency over the roll. You know, like manipulating your wilds, or if you have 3 of a kind, you can pick yours. Then doing what it takes to get that inspire feels like pretty high priority. It's rare that you would forego an inspire, I think, for the most part with these folks.
Notably, because it says you can make a prophecy roll at the beginning of each round, that's not going to trigger the inspire if you get Foretold Wisdom, because it needs to be a successful attack. But I think the other thing that's fun with Foretold Wisdom is after successful attack, if you score surges during the attack, which I think an aggro deck really favors this warband, because if, like, for instance, in my game, I scored like the perfect cut and another aggro card during the attack action. So I scored 2 surges, and I rolled Foretold Wisdom because these are all happening simultaneously. You can choose
simultaneously with some of them. Some of those attack surges are like
During
when this
the
roll
attack,
include, in which case it would trigger before you get as far as Vision in the Blood, I think.
Yeah, and I can't remember quite exactly the cards I scored, but you're only going to see one card from the top from Foretold Wisdom, and so of the 2, I had one of them, and so scoring 2, you can do Foretold Wisdom and look at the top card prior to drawing your surge, your new cards from scoring the surges. And so Skylar and I were geeking out about that because it felt like the peak of the mastery aspect of this warband.
Yeah. If you have the right scoring window on those surges, then you'll have some agency over how you manipulate those. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think, for example, like a Branching Fate would probably be a little early because it's looking at the results, versus Visions in the Blood happens immediately after a friendly fighter's successful attack. So you would see both results and then be able to do Visions in the Blood and cast the dice, but you can then choose the order.
If you have something that's triggering after the attack, but the other nice thing is even just if you have that roll early in the, as your first roll of the action phase, then you're almost always holding a surge, and so what you might be working towards. I think a good example here is Rack and Ruin. You have some very positional things. If hey, I am going to surge into Alone in the Dark, so just bear that in mind. Now, you might argue that like a particularly skilled player is working towards those anyway, but it's nice to know for sure which one you are going to be dealing with.
Yeah, it can make focusing way more easier of a choice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Exactly. And I'd be curious to see how it impacts deck building for these folks. Like if you're like, hey, that one's a little spicier or a little more situational objective, am I comfortable putting it in knowing that I can send it to the bottom because when I want to score it is usually in round 3, and I have a little bit more control over when it shows up.
Yeah, they're probably the most willing to attempt annihilation in a deck.
Certainly have the tools to help not have it too early, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about those stats real quick. You mentioned Karnavix was the only one who started on 2 dodge. She is the leader, 4 health, 4 move, 2 bounty, and 1 attack profile, which is range 1, 2 hammers, 2 damage. The only thing she gets out of Inspire is a 3rd hammer. which is nice for accuracy, and then more dice gives you a better chance of triggering that slaughter, foretold slaughter, maybe getting your crit grievous on there. Creata, I think, is a pretty important fighter for this, mostly because of this attack profile. Brian, you want to run through her?
Yeah, so 4 move, 4 health, 2 bounty, 1 dodge, and her attack profile is range 1, 4 swords, 1 damage. Pretty uneventful, but the 4 dice really help with the foretold slaughter, getting the crit damage out.
Yeah.
But when she inspires, she gets that also necessary 2 dodge. Her attack profile gains damage for 2, so with Foretold Slaughter, she could spike up to 3. And I think most fun is because she's got the really cool, like, best model in the kit, where she's leaping and got the bat wings. And on her inspired side, she does gain fly. So little Batman gliding here going.
Yeah, I will say in person, her model was better than I thought it looked in pictures. It looked a little flat to me in some of the pictures, but it's got. I know you like the models. These were maybe not my favorite, but they were better in person.
Yeah, she's got a lot of good forward motion as a model.
Phil, you want to take Tazari?
Yeah, so this is our other winged elf. Also 4 move, 1 dodge, 4 health, 2 bounty. Has 2 different melee attack profiles, range 1, 2 hammers for 2 damage, or range 2, 3 swords for 1 damage. So slightly less accurate with the swords, but having more dice, again, better odds for rolling those crits. And then inspired, you do, again, pick up the extra dodge, and it combines the 2 profiles, which we've seen before. But that way you then end up with range 2, 2 hammers for 2 damage, which is actually pretty nice. You don't see that a lot this edition. And also gets the flying because of the wing cape thing.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I totally overlooked that she also gained fly.
Yeah,
I think that's just hilarious.
For you guys, having actually played against and with these guys, how much do you feel like fly still matters this edition?
It is situational at best, I think. It'll occasionally get you some surprises, especially in like a real kind of tied up battle line that somebody will pop over the top. But it's not as big as it was previously, in my opinion.
I think it's a great tool. But yeah, it's not like a make or break characteristic.
Yeah, not being able to fly through blocked hexes and not really having a lot of differing terrain anymore. I feel like it's been sidelined a lot. So yeah, I haven't seen it really impact any games yet of second edition.
Yeah, it unfortunate for them. Like if you had a warband, like obviously Exiled Dead aren't necessarily a factor, but like being able to pop over to a Sepulchral Guard Warden, it's just unfortunate that they have to inspire first, so they have to engage with the front line guys to try and inspire to then hop over that line where they would be a lot more fun to just start off with fly and be able to threaten like an assassination attack.
Yeah, I find maybe most often what fly is doing for me is rather than getting me able to hit something I couldn't hit before, it's letting me hit something from an angle that I couldn't hit it before. So,
reducing the supports.
Exactly. So that is the most common use for it, but that can be pretty important. So.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of unfortunate that it's on their inspired side because being able to make your attacks more accurate is necessary in order to get them inspired. So they'd kind of prefer if it was on their uninspired side as well.
Yep. Range 2 is kind of handy. Gets you some extra, sometimes some extra swings that you might not either get, which would get you some more rolls on the table for foretelling things. And is often the tradition, or I say often, I guess maybe only the Shadeborn have this as an example, but there is one male elf who the Witch Elves are considered the male elves kind of like this lower caste or
they are
lower tier in society.
Definitely second tier citizens.
Yeah. And he's not as healthy. He's down at 3 health. He's only worth 1 bounty. So he could dangle, although he's got actually pretty great threat range. So he's also helpful to set towards the back because he's probably going to get an attack in from wherever he wants if he's pretty far back. Speed 4 and a range 3. It starts out with that kind of nothing much melee attack, 2 swords, 1 damage, and then a 3 swords, 1 damage ranged attack. Both those, the dice become hammers. So 2 hammers for 1 damage, 3 hammers for 1 damage at melee and range. Gets his second dodge dice as well. So he actually turns into a pretty good prophecy generator once he is inspired. He can just kind of crack off those shots at pretty accurate 3 hammers and keep the roll going. Which is good if you already are kind of inspired across the board, but you'll find yourself saying like, well, he's the one most likely to get the roll, but I actually need one of my 2 flyers to land the next hit because I really want them to get inspired so they can get turboed up.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I found that, he was kind of my dangle bro, used him to leap ahead, get onto a feature token, and, just wanted. I got lucky that he inspired, but he quickly fell with only 3 health. I was telling Skylar, I think during that match, the only times I made successful defenses was when Skylar whiffed. So my, even though I got inspired pretty quickly, I was unable to roll successes. But I was having success on offense. Mm-hmm. In fact, with all of the warband, you'd think Krieta is kind of like the standout fighter, but I found that Tazari, with her range options of range 1, range 2, and the different dice profiles, she was my most versatile fighter with those profiles, and so she was actually my favorite. Krieta was good, but when I had the aggro deck, there was some cards that were like asking for all successes. I think I brought Perfect Strike, and I looked at the 4 swords and I was like, no.
What was Skylar playing in your practice?
So he ran Miari's Purifiers with Realmstone Raiders and Emberstone Sentinels.
Okay. My practice games were against Jaws of Itzel, with Jaws using Realmstone Blazing to try a kind of aggro. We'll get to Realmstone in a bit. The interesting part about that matchup, it went real lopsided one way and then real lopsided the other way. Because the Knives of the Crone, they're like, hey, I really need an attack to land so that I can roll this on this table and hopefully inspire. And the Jaws are like, hey, I really want you to attack and miss so that I can damage you with the and so there was so much swinging on those early kind of lower accuracy attack rolls, and in one game the inspires cascaded for one side and not the other, and the other game it went the other way.
No doubt.
So wow. I think that is a particular matchup that is lopsided, but I think it highlights something. We've talked, I think both of us, several times about how quote unquote desperate they are to inspire. I think chasing that puts a lot of pressure on kind of throwing these fighters who are at first on just the one dodge for most of them forward, which can be a little scary, and it means you're going to take your licks back pretty decent.
Yeah. So in my matchup, so you had a very swingy, for and against. I had perfectly middle of the road because against Skylar, I had Crone, Knives of the Crone with Blazing Assault and Cataclysm, going for kind of that movement and teleporting with a lot of accuracy bonuses. And accuracy bonuses were definitely the highlights here.
We were using the same pairing for the Knives, was Blazing and Kata.
Yeah. Hidden Aid was insanely profitable on the fighter it went on to. I rolled like 5 dice and I rolled 4 flanked results. I was like, what? But yeah, what was fun narratively is that at first I was like, man, this is rough. Like, I'm taking a lot of damage because I was only on 1 dodge, and I was I got the whole warband inspired in round 2, but I was already down a fighter at that point, and we were trading blows. But I was like, because Miari started off with the Aether Quartz, I was like, it's feeling very privileged of you high elves that you start off with your benefits, and I have to inspire to get to my benefits. And he's like, yeah, and like we were wary at first about the power level, but then we ended in a true tie, 17-17, and I was like, ooh, that was fun. So yeah, we had a good match, trading blows, and I think my final fighter was Creta with the Batwing, so that was fun. And it was like Creta to the sword fighter for Miari's.
Okay, Islan, I think.
Yeah. So enjoyed it. I thought that this warband would be fun. I don't know power level wise. I'm like kind of putting them at like a high B tier maybe. I'm sure I wasn't playing a totally optimized deck. But yeah, I'm personally kind of guessing that they're like at a high B tier. But their war scroll is a lot of fun to just prophesize and manipulate.
Well, let me ask you about that, because you were excited about the idea of a war scroll that kind of comprised one main ability that you got to operate with. How did you feel about that relative to, as someone who's played a ton of Gardeners? How do you feel about any parallels or lack thereof between the two?
So parallel wise, I mean, the warband does kind of revolve around it, but less so than Gardeners. Gardeners, you like have ebb and flow on the offensive ability. Here, sort of the same. Like I said, I got Foretold Slaughter off, but if you could definitely lean back on their stat profiles a bit more. I don't think they have the staying power like Gardeners, and so that's what I think puts them lower than I'd like them to be. But I don't think they're bad. It's Casino Elves again. If Arena were Casino aggro, this is Casino control aggro, and I don't think it's a bad mechanic at all. It's just going to be sometimes it's going to be the fates are fickle kind of a thing. I'd be really curious to see what they can do with Realmstone Raiders, just in being able to like help that deck kind of manipulate the card order. But also I don't really think that it's all that enticing for them. But we'll get into that deck. But I do like the warband. I do like how it functions. It's just that it's more dice dependency as a mechanic, so I think it's less reliable, less competitive, but really fun.
Yeah, I had similar feelings. I think there's so much pressure to just keep attacking, to keep getting rolls on that table, that it made it slightly less interesting, I guess, is what I'd say. Like, it was just there's a little less to do, like a little less nuance than with the Gardeners, where you're like, okay, like if I hold this much treasure versus this much treasure,
right? There's no counterplay here for the opponent.
Yeah, there's less interaction back and forth. There's less of a tug of war over that core mechanic. But I think it often felt like, hey, I'm pretty much most of the time going to have a reroll on defense, and then I get to keep manipulating my objective deck if I want to. Kind of felt like the two things I was doing the most, and only the latter of those two is the particularly interesting, or like, hey, here's a cool mechanic. Like, having a reroll is powerful on defense, but it's also like there's just like, did you like that roll? No, okay, roll again.
Yeah.
So we mentioned Cataclysm and Blazing. What do you think we're looking for out of any deck pairing? Like, when you're reaching for something, are there any? You can say deck specifically, or assets that a deck might bring as what makes a deck attractive.
Certainly accuracy. I'm partial, from my Gardener's experience, to the redundancy found within Emberstone and Pillage in terms of the power deck tons of defense there, but there's already a ton of defense in Gardeners, so I'm kind of like leaning back towards it as a crutch because there's double healing, there's a ton of guard tech there.
Yeah.
So
guard cards are real nice for these guys, right?
Yeah.
Like you get two dice on guard with a reroll. That's a real spicy defensive profile.
Right. Completely changes the outlook on their survivability. But again, like I don't think you want to be skewing too hard into like a defense build with them. Probably is not the right way to go. Because again, like Pillage Emberstone would be a different kind of scoring profile than what their War Scroll want, like they're offensively trying to do. But that's like, again, my crutch going back. But I'm immediately trying to think of ways to augment them, but I'm also like, I think that's maybe a bad investment, and you want to be instead investing harder into the aggro, the accuracy. If there's some way, because again, you only have 4 health fighters, and Asfael, I think he's always just going to be like let's see how long he lives. Being able to keep one fighter tooled up and healthy, I think is kind of what you're going to be doing. But yeah, I think it's a fun warband. Accuracy is what is calling to me, aside from my falling back on my crutch. But what do you think, Phil? Did you have any immediate takes on what you want to try?
Well, I was, everything that I saw from the warband screamed aggro to me. I know they say they're mastery, but like they would need to be hitting attacks to roll on the table. And if you're going to need to be hitting attacks, then you should gear yourself towards being rewarded for making those attacks. So I was just like, probably blazing plus something, and then figure out what it is. Their survivability is maybe a problem, but I don't know if that's always going to be the case. So maybe you can just like go full aggro and just say like, well, hopefully the defense dice help me, and if they don't, they don't.
Man, they would love Reckless Fury to be unforsaken and get utter ignorance back
but
out.
Also, yes. I mean, honestly, I could see them using Reckless Fury pretty well, but I think it comes down to like, are you going to be able to hit harder and faster than your opponent? Because if you miss and you just charged in, I think you're in trouble. So
yeah. Once this warband's inspired, if you can get head case out on Asfael, he's just going to be taking a charge token so that the rest of them can keep swinging.
Yeah, right. I think our buddy Jake made an interesting comment just from a flavor perspective. He's like, unfortunate that these fighters don't work particularly well with Edge of the Knife because of like they're the knives of the Crone.
Yeah, sure.
And honestly, like there are a lot of cards in Edge that would probably work well for them, but it's a tough thing to do because you need to be taking damage and trying to get tempered, which I think they don't do particularly well.
But then again, like being able to bottom deck Trial of the Tempered, it's not bad.
It's not terrible. I don't know.
Could you do Edge of the Knife and Blazing where you bottom deck Trial of the Tempered and Annihilation?
No.
That's pretty greedy.
I think you pick one if you're going to do that. But I mean, maybe you can run that deck. I don't know. I'll
try it.
Excited to see what people do with this warband. I'm probably not going to be the one to try them out too much, but I do think they look interesting, and I hope somebody can crack the code on them and make a pretty interesting high-speed aggro deck.
I'm still in love with Gardeners and still keeping the reps flowing in preparation for Ottawa. But I've been looking forward to having a second warband that I've been excited to just have more, not in like a throwaway mindset, but like, less power and more experimental fun. And I think I've landed on Edge of the Knife, Blazing Assault, and getting super greedy.
Okay, Wellner. I'm glad you're psyched for them. I feel like they got a little less meat on the bone than Gardeners as far as that goes. So I'm a little less fired up about them, but I think they're cool. And I think I'd agree with your guys' assessment that decks that provide. I think blazing is a pretty apparent pairing, especially tossing a lot of attacks, sometimes tossing a lot of dice, and so some of the blazing assault surges and objectives in general are good, and obviously that power deck is very tasty.
Very
well,
very
there's
good.
certainly less meat on the bone here because one of them's not wielding a pot for a belly.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that about covers it. At the time of this release, we won't necessarily have a. It usually takes just a little bit longer for Underworld's DB to get updated, and so we'll try and link to something. I'll update the blog post effectively with any of the decks that we built for playtesting. If people want to have something hot and ready to try out right away, or maybe we'll even assemble a list. So
Very neat.
well, let's talk about that. We it sounds like in a couple of these practice games, Realmstone Raiders was involved. Let's talk about that. Realmstone Raiders, also an archetype of mastery. Not only is this mastery, but this one has a plot card, making a third plot card deck. We'll talk about the implications of that a little bit. But Phil, do you feel comfortable running us through what that plot card reads?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I will try and paraphrase rather than read it verbatim.
No, I think that's totally fair,
because I think the card is actually a bit obtuse. So essentially, the plot card is giving you this ability raiding.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that when you hit with a melee attack, you are allowed to raid a number of times equal to the bounty characteristic of the target that you hit. So, if you hit a really big guy like Mollog, you're going to get to raid 4 times. What a raid is you will reveal the top card of your power deck, and then if it is an Emberstone card, which it explains that there are cards in this power deck that are labeled as being Emberstone, you can choose to keep it on top, or you can put it to the bottom of your power deck. Certain Emberstone cards have ploy abilities or surge abilities, I guess. Some upgrades, some ploys that then say, if you reveal this card, you have the ability to use the surge right now and play the card immediately. So that'll only ever trigger, outside of a couple power cards, that'll only trigger when you make a successful attack. So keep that in mind for later. And then if the card that you reveal is not an Emberstone card, which there are cards in the deck which are not, and of course, if you're playing Nemesis, you're going to have at least some cards from a different deck that are not from this deck. All of those immediately just go to the bottom of your deck. You have no choice about what you do with those cards. So that is the plot card. It informs a ton of what you need to do and think about when you play this deck, which is a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
So, Dodo, question out of the way. Naturally, pairing this with Emberstone Sentinels works? No? Because Emberstone Sentinels, Emberstone ploy upgrades with Realmstone Raiders? No?
No. Unfortunately, it has to actually say on the card. There's a thing that is just put on these to say Emberstone.
Yeah.
Because it is the Realmstone of Akshi, which is the realm that we're in.
Yep.
But unintuitively, thanks narrative game design, this is going to make confusion between the decks.
Certainly possible. It's fairly obvious which power cards have the Emberstone label, though, so I think you can pretty well.
I just think it's inevitable that somebody's going to think that there was a direct connection between these decks and that they were meant to pair.
Well, Scarlet didn't do it. We can talk about that later, but
I think some good numbers to keep in mind here, since you mentioned Emberstone cards. 9 of the 12 objectives specifically reference Emberstone. They're looking specifically for Emberstone cards, and all 6 of the surges. And in the power deck, there are 6 Emberstone ploys and 6 Emberstone upgrades. Some are great, some are not, and I think that's going to feature heavily in kind of our assessment of this deck.
Very much so.
What about first thoughts on that plot card, that raid mechanic. How did it feel? So the idea. How about the general idea of it as a mechanic, and then how it looked in practice? Anybody got? I know Brian, you haven't necessarily seen this.
I haven't played as it,
Okay.
but I played against it once.
Okay.
My immediate thought upon reading the Realmstone Raiders plot card was like, this would have been nice when we had third end phase cards, but we don't. So now what?
Doesn't help with objectives anyway. So
yeah, it's only cycling your power.
My initial thoughts on reading it. I actually interpreted it wrong the first time, which is why I paraphrased a bit. But when I read it, I thought it was saying any of the power cards from this deck are the kind of cards that you can choose whether to keep on top or bottom. And I was like, oh, this should be pretty nice. You can like pretty well shape the deck, especially in Rivals. Mm-hmm. And then you kindly pointed out to me that I was wrong and that's not even close to what the deck does. And it really tanked my views on the deck, at least on paper. It's a lot to have to to just work through, especially because of how much your scoring cares about having these cards. In playing against it with Skylar, it very much put him in a weird spot where he was having to like care more about his power deck as a scoring resource than as a actual card resource. So it was like not trying to keep cards that are good. It was like just trying to find the Emberstone cards. So like the whole time it was just, let me keep cycling till I find these Emberstone cards just so that I can make sure I can score things. Most of the time when he was trying to, get the cards going, it was very much a situation of like, okay, now I've done the thing, but now all these cards I want to have are gone. And so it was like, usually in Underworlds, you're really wanting to, have powerful power cards all the time so that you can keep using them and sort of snowball in as the game goes. And this kind of like turns that on its head. And it's like, no, keep the resources in the deck so you can keep cycling through them, which is weird.
So the paradigm shift that Skylar said he was working through was that you want to get through you want to make use of your ploys and upgrades. But if the objective hand isn't telling you to use the Realmstone, like if you don't have those, you got to reserve those and you got to hold on to them. You only want to be seeing new cards from your power deck through like Realmstone raiding. You don't want to, if you have Realmstone cards and you don't have a attached objective to it in hand, hold on to those. Don't ditch them in the end phase. And you're cycling through as you go through your objective deck, then you spend your power card. So you're much more reserved on the power hand because it so dictates your scoring ability. I hope that made more sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he said in our game, again, he started off with a healthy lead, and it was once I got my fighters inspired and I was able to kind of push back, that he said while it was an even match, I was having poor luck on defense dice, but he was having good luck on the Realmstone. He said if his Realmstone card sequence was worse or like was clunking more, because he felt like it was clunky in a mental paradigm shift, like trying to abandon his previous habits in order to Realmstone raid effectively. But the cards were cooperating with that. So he was able to overcome the mental clunk, but because he wasn't having card clunk. He's like, if I had card clunk too, it would have been a much different.
It takes, so I similar to you, Phil, like first read through on it for me, I was like, yeah, this seems cool. You're gonna like see a lot of cards. You're gonna kind of manipulate what you got, but as we'll see, like some of the best upgrades in this deck are not Emberstone, right? And so
yeah,
you are just forcing those to the bottom unless you're like real careful. I think I'm skeptical of what like the top power level on this is, but to like get a lot out of it, I think mastery, either mastery over your your card probabilities, or just mastery of really understanding exactly what's in your deck and where it might be, is kind of your best chance to get something out of it. Let's talk some examples of some of these cards. We'll do our usual where we kind of give everyone a chance to talk about as many cards as they found interesting to discuss on any given spot. So, Phil, do you have anything that jumped out of you at you objective wise?
So there's a couple of the end phases that I actually think are pretty interesting. But I'll start with Surges just because the Surges all care about the actual Emberstone cards. And I think it's worth highlighting the Surges in the sense that it like can highlight some of the clunkiness of what you're needing to do in a pretty effective way. So one that I actually like from the Surges is called Rage Rock Strike. You score this immediately after resolving the Emberstone Ploy ability or the Emberstone Upgrade ability, which would suggest you need to have raided a card, and then it has to have been played immediately. Like there will be times where you just don't want to do this, but if it's like, hey, if a power card just said play this as a surge, score a glory, you'd probably take that. So
yeah.
I'm actually kind of okay with that one. To highlight something is sort of on the opposite spectrum, we have Pillage, which it says score this immediately after raiding 2 or more different Emberstone cards after a melee attack if the target was in neutral or enemy territory. This is for 1 glory. So a few things that are kind of hard to parse with this. To be able to do that, you actually have to hit an enemy that's 2 or more bounty. It has to be from a melee attack, and then they have to be in the right spot when you hit them. And then
you have to,
and then on top of that, the draw.
Then you have to actually flip the right kind of card, and it has to be 2 different ones. So
you have tons of conditions. Then you have the dice odds whether or not the attack is successful, and then you have the card draw to making sure that they're Jesus.
Yeah. So like this kind of highlights, I think, a good like spectrum of like really hard to deal with to pretty reasonable to deal with surges in how the deck plays. I think that this is also a good time to highlight that this specifically says different Emberstone cards, and there are some objectives that just say rated X number of Emberstone cards. What that says to me is that the cards that say just Emberstone, you could keep flipping the same Emberstone card once you have it on the top. You could just be like, I raid, it's this card, I put it back on top. Then you raid again, it's still an Emberstone card. So useful for later, but I think those two highlight the weird paradigm of the surges in this deck.
Yeah, that 100% makes sense. Like you have this, even within the objectives, asking you to do some different things. And then typically you would be leveraging this power card ability to be like, okay, I'm going to see more power cards. I'm going to use, their Emberstone Ploy, Emberstone Upgrade to like pull more out of my deck, so that I'm basically burning through my deck faster. Like that feels like it should be powerful, but doing so often thins out so much Emberstone from your deck that all of a sudden your deck is unscorable.
Yep.
I played this as pure rivals, so with like the full as well as a nemesis pairing, but I played it once as full rivals, and so that meant there was a full complement of 12 Emberstone cards in here, and I still, in order to score some of these, which was like see some of them, or you're just drawing into them. By the end, I actually had several unscorable objectives because I knew I just didn't have. I had basically consolidated all non-Emberstone cards to the bottom of my deck, and I was now at the bottom of my deck. So any objective that was referencing Emberstone was like, nope, sorry. You've already worked through your other Emberstone to score your other stuff. So
yep.
I think there's a learning curve there. Like I might have done a little less drawing or sent more of them to the bottom, but. Again, sometimes you're like, well, I don't want to send them to the bottom because I want to make sure, guarantee that I will see an Emberstone on the next thing here.
Yep.
That sounds like the paradigm shift where like you were in, as usual, trying to utilize and use optimally timing wise, but this changes that where the optimal use is purely dictated by the objective cards.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of potential for like, like if you're like, hey, your power deck is there to score you. I mean, I guess ultimately everything is there to try to score you glory in the long run. But if your power deck is all of a sudden this resource that you're like, this is there to be manipulated in certain ways so that I can score objectives, not to be used as what we typically think of it as, is like a pile of resources to execute things on the tabletop. Yeah, that's, like you said, that's tough.
It's like your power deck, your power hand is genuinely dictated to and services the objective cards. Otherwise, don't use it.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to highlight, and this is a card I would probably never include in any Nemesis pairing, but I think it highlights another aspect of what's going on with these objectives. Emberstone Stash. It's only 1 glory for the end phase. Scores an end phase if you rated 4 or more different Emberstone cards this battle round. That's a lot to ask.
So much.
Really, really hard. But there's a bookkeeping aspect to this. Like, if you know that you might surge into this, like if you have it, then you're keeping track right away. If you know you might surge into it, then you have to like, okay, let me keep track of how many Emberstone. And you just get to the end of the round, you have to be like, hey, I promise, like here I rated this Emberstone on this Emberstone on this Emberstone. You know, like it's just a lot to then have to explain to your opponent who is thinking about their own stuff. I'm really kind of disappointed about the amount of different bookkeeping that goes on. If you ran this as its pure rivals, it's actually an awful lot of things to keep track of. Like how many different times did you raid? How many different times did you raid and get unique Emberstone cards? Right. How many times do you raid and get just straight up Emberstone cards? How many times was one of those raids like on somebody who is on a treasure token? Like there's just so much to keep track of, and I think that's not the best design. It can make for a frustrating thing. You draw into something, and if you haven't been like really specifically thinking about it, you're like, I don't know, like I wasn't thinking about this objective. Now I'm not sure if I've actually met that.
Yeah. And the cards are revealed to the opponent, so it's, not like they're going to be card counting on you. But I got complaints plenty as the Gardeners player where they're like, I'm struggling to keep up with when your cycle moves around. And I, no matter how many times I explained it, sometimes it was just a struggle. And this is even worse.
I legitimately thought about this as like a pretty strong reason for needing to have a notebook while you're playing and to like force your opponent to have to like write down exactly what's happening. Because if you don't, how can you possibly know at the end phase that like, yep, I definitely did these things.
Yeah. Right.
And that's unfortunate. But
as a judge, I hope this doesn't become a meta pick.
I'd be shocked, to be perfectly honest. But yes, I agree.
To sandwich some good cards, I think there is a couple favorites in here. There's a 2 glory end phase, and you guys can tell me if I'm just completely reading this wrong because I have been repeatedly confused. But this is 2 glory end phase, rouse 2 violence. Score this in an end phase if the number of treasure tokens on the battlefield is equal to or less than the number of Emberstone cards you rated this battle round. If you're playing Pillage, and Pillage is super popular for your opponents to pick, this seems pretty good to score. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah.
I don't understand why it's called Rouse to Violence when it's really like pillaging, but there's a couple name problems with this deck. If we could complain some more, there's a few card titles that I wholeheartedly disagree with.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my favorite end phase card out of this deck is Hoarder's Hovel. Score this in an end phase if any friendly fighters are holding a treasure token that has a value equal to that fighter's bounty characteristic.
So I think quite powerful with certain warbands and real dud with some others.
Yeah, if you got a good range of profiles for bounty, you hold 1, 2, or 3, or 4 in the crazy circumstance of Black Powder. No,
Molag.
Who's the 4?
Malag's the 4 bounty.
Yeah.
Zicket is actually the warband that comes to mind here. They've got kind of some speed, a couple maneuver tricks, and they have a 3-2-1, technically a 0. Not that matters, but
biggest spread.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're pairing this with Emberstone Sentinels, then you switch things up, and it becomes super easy.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
And I played with Kagras. I just played the hold objective 3-4 card as like a 13th objective, because it's like, at some point I'm probably going to be standing on one of these. Yeah. And this is basically that, but for 2 glory. So it'll often be hold objective 1-2, but I think it's one of the better end phases in the deck. And I agree that I think Roused Violence is actually pretty reliable as well.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this is just kind of a little splash in there. We've seen there's other decks where, hey, depending on what strategy you're going for, you might scoop this up. Like if you look at Countdown, set explosives, maybe not everybody wants to try for set explosives, but many warbands who are reaching for that do.
Yeah.
So you can kind of pick and choose. Similarly with like Rack and Ruin, you can be like, I actually think I can do Alone in the Dark pretty well. Let me just dip in and take that.
Yep.
We'll talk about whether we think you can dip in and take this, but if there's not a whole lot along those lines of Hoarder's Hovel. That's not like a theme that runs through the deck. This is just kind of like a random one in here that's like, hey, I'm here too. Like, all right.
Yeah. Just sort of just because.
A few cherries to pick.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think it's worth calling out Realmstone Raid for kind of like a TBD interpretation, or did we land on an interpretation of this one?
No, I don't think we've landed on anything. I don't think there's a way to.
So this one is score this in an end phase if you raided 3 or more times after different friendly fighters attacked this battle round.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to summarize, there's kind of 2 ways that we thought of that this could be read. One would be that you raided a total of 3 or more cards, and you had to have done so with 3 different fighters, which would be bad. Because if you think about it, you get 4 activations per round.
Big ouch.
And so ideally, you would usually expect maybe you can hit with 2 of the 4 attacks you get in a round. That wouldn't be enough for this. Or you could read it to say you saw 3 or more, cards from your rating, and that happened in different fighters' attacks. So it's like you hit 1 for 2 cards and then hit another 1 for 1. You've now raided 3 times. Therefore, does it score?
Basically, basically just saying you can't take 1 tooled up accurate fighter and just bonk, bonk, bonk for 3 different raids. So you have to at least, use a different fighter sometimes.
With 2 fighters. So I don't know. I don't have a good way to say that it should be one way or the other. I think anybody can make the argument either way, but I think we need an FAQ on that one.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
That hit on a lot of the objectives. Do we want to highlight anything else? I don't know that there's really any I want to.
Same.
Yeah, I think we can move on to power cards. Let's go with ploys. Who's got a ploy they'd like to call out?
The one that Skylar used most rudely against me, Hidden Knowledge. This is an Emberstone ploy. Pick an enemy fighter adjacent to a friendly fighter. Give that fighter a move token.
Another one with a name that I'm like, oh, that's not what I thought this was.
I was expecting like a card draw or something, but no.
Yeah.
So that that's really good control. I think that is something for in the column of mastery for the deck. Other than having to master the deck's own mechanic, it offers a lot of control ability there. He used it to my detriment when I had 1 fighter remaining and I wanted to be charging, and that was very limiting.
Yeah. I had certain board states where it was pretty dead, but I think when it's powerful, it's extremely powerful. I think it's a good call out.
Yeah. This is potentially a reason to push you towards a warband that has like positioning tricks where you can kind of get a fighter adjacent, even if they're not the one maybe doing the attacking.
Yeah.
So you can be like, oh, I'm going to go over here to make this attack, but then I'm sending this other fighter, either like a goblin because you scurried, or
I don't know, a dog.
A dog. I've been in the Hexbane's mindset a little bit lately. But it's really strong, right? It's like if you have a way to just move somebody or push somebody for free and then be like, okay, that fighter is locked down, no charges, I don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
It's very good.
I could see a situation where like Yulthari's charge in, get a successful attack, raid, hidden knowledge. You now have a move token, and then yoink the fighter back with their teleport.
So I thought of the same thing, but I talked to Skylar about it, who has played a lot of Iltharis and has way better ideas about how Iltharis are going to play. And he thought that this would be a really awkward pairing because of all the extra card draw through the seeds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, well, what if you ended up putting 3 of your Emberstone cards in the seeds? And I was like, oh, yeah, that'd be pretty bad.
Yeah.
Huh.
So maybe not Iltharis, but maybe you could try it, see how it goes.
I mean, there's other teleport cards too.
Yeah, and you could always bring extra cards, right? You get like with Iltharis, you can run more than 20 power cards, so maybe you just
Right.
You can, but then you're thinning out your
I know.
Realmstone. Yeah. I've done these thought loops a number of times.
Yep, I know. You can get yourself twisted into knots thinking about this power deck.
Yeah. I'll say one that gets me fired up is Manipulated Fate.
Oh man, so
It's
good.
a surge ploy. It is so good that like I think it will always make me keep looking back at this deck and be like, can I make this? Is this a
Yeah,
thing?
maybe. Can I do this?
Like it's super powerful. Play this immediately after friendly fighter is picked as the target of an attack. Save rolls made for that attack count as having more crits than the attack roll for the purposes of the stand fast ability. Whew.
Yeah,
So it means you will automatically stand fast unless there's some rule saying that you're not allowed to stand fast or whatever. But you're going to reduce the damage by 1, and you are not going to get moved off your spot. That is 2 individually very extremely powerful effects to guarantee.
Yep.
And you can do it with like a single dice defense fighter where somebody's like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm tossing 6 dice at this guy. So they're going down. Like
Nope.
they're unlikely to. They're not going to stand fast me.
Skylar did that to me, 5-1. Stand fasted.
yeah.
Yeah.
This one card makes me so sad that this is a plot locked deck and that you can't pair it with Edge of the Knife.
Ooh.
Because if you could, I'd be really happy, but unfortunately, no. It's not to be.
Yeah. Also,
I'm okay
not an
with the title-
Emberstone card.
Yeah,
Not
and,
an
and I'm
Emberstone,
okay
yeah.
with the title and the card effect relation.
Yep. Sure. They did all right here.
Absolutely. This one actually makes sense.
Yeah.
I think one other card that we have to highlight, or at least Skylar felt like it was crucial to the deck, which I didn't really pick up on my first read, is Raiders Rapture, which is a domain for when you raid, you reveal an additional card. And this will persist until the end of the round and blah, 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 all the normal domain stuff. So this does not increase the value of your raid. So it's not like the bounty characteristic is increased. It's just when you would raid, you get to reveal 2 cards per raid, which is nice because it'll give you a better chance of seeing the Emberstone cards, which I think is pretty important.
Necessary. Yeah.
But what it will not allow you to do, which we talked through during our practice game, is that if you hit a fighter whose value of 0, you still don't get to raid because you are raiding 0 times and then you can't actually see the extra card for your raid. So
Yeah.
I think now is maybe, like, since I brought it up, pretty good time to point out that like this deck gets kind of shut down by resurrected fighters who are worth 0 bounty.
Right.
Yeah.
This completely turns off raid if you hit those fighters. So another thing to think about when you're trying to be like, oh, maybe this deck has some cool stuff for me.
On the flip of this, I had this card up. I think we were maybe Zickets into Jaws. Zickets with this Pure Rivals into Jaws Pure Blazing. And I had this card up and then rated on Crojacks. And so I saw 2 cards, then 2 cards, and 2 cards. Like it was like,
Wow.
look at 6 cards from your deck right away. Sent almost all of them to the bottom because of the card order. But yeah. I think that's a good highlight. We got any other ploys that we want to touch on?
Angered focus, like if this deck couldn't get in its own way anymore.
Oh my God.
This sounds good at first, and then there's a caveat that just it is an Emberstone ploy. Pick a friendly fighter holding a treasure token in friendly territory that does not have any move, charge, or stagger tokens. Rated number of cards equal to the fighter's bounty characteristic. Great. Cards rated in this way do not count as having been rated as a result of a successful attack. Like, okay, that's probably going to turn off a lot of the scoring that would have otherwise loved this card.
Yeah, I think I looked. There are maybe 5 objectives that care about rating and don't need it to be an attack, but you are specifically kind of messing up the ones that do potentially. So
Yeah. And then finding a way to get a larger fighter onto a token without any tokens on the fighter is kind of awkward.
Yeah. And then Skylar, we want to make sure I mentioned Raiders Premonition, Emberstone Play. Pick an objective card from your hand and put it on the bottom of your objective deck, then draw 1 objective card. I think I was like lukewarm on this, and then playing with it. Maybe it had something to do with like the awkwardness of the Realmstone Raiders objective deck, but I was like, oh, thank God I have this. So I think what did I? Oh, I had drawn right away the have raid more times than there are treasure, and I was like, this is not going to score. I don't have anything anything delved yet. Like that's not going to happen. So I was able to toss that to the bottom. Like we'll work towards that. We'll work towards which ended up being a mistake because by the time I got to the end, I didn't have any Emberstone, so it didn't matter that there was no treasure, but so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but I think that's a real high potential for like some cool plays to manipulate your deck, and even wilder if you did have it paired with Knives of the Crone, you would know exactly what you're drawing to replace whatever you're ditching out of your hand.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Would be cool. I think this is one of those cards where like you'd know when you want it in your deck. You would build around it. So if you're playing like Pillage with this and you know you've got Strip the Realm and your opponent is just on too many tokens and you're just like 0 chance at scoring, send it to the bottom. If you see it at the end of the game, there's a decent chance your opponent might only have like 1 fighter left, and there's a better chance of you keeping them off a token. So kind of love that. There's a few other applications for similar ideas of cards that are like way better at the end of the game than at the beginning. So send them to the bottom.
Yeah, down you go. Well, let's talk upgrades.
Oh boy,
I will. There's I think we can kind of roll into one. It has the full set of stat upgrades.
Yep,
great.
And so there's no like +1 save, but it does have +1 health for great fortitude, +1 move for great speed, grievous kind of +1 damage for great strength, and then keen eye for +1 attack dice. Those are 4 banger upgrades, and none of them are Emberstone, and so if you're not careful, you will send them all to the bottom of your deck, and then have to have to send Emberstone after them to float them back up to the top.
Yep.
So
awkward, but they're still very strong. I don't suspect you wouldn't want these in your deck when you have access to them. Yeah. It is a bit awkward to have these decks where it's like, hey, you get all of these, because now we have 3 decks that have all of these, I think. Right?
Or close to.
Or
there's some that have significant overlap for
like
sure.
3 of them or something, where it's like, okay, so now if you try to do those pairings, effectively one of those pairings isn't giving you hardly any upgrades because these all overlap. So a little awkward for deck building, but they're good and time tested.
Yeah, like you'd think it'd be nice to have these as an option so that you're not looking for them in your pairing and bringing the other decks like unique cards. But the more of those you bring, the less Emberstone cards you're bringing. So it's counterintuitive.
A little bit. How about any of these Emberstone upgrades? Are there any that we're like really happy to put in the deck?
They are less exciting than the Emberstone ploys.
I would agree.
This is not a particularly interesting one. Well, actually, since we're talking about Emberstone ploys, there's there are 2 recycling cards here. That's Forgotten Fortune. Will let you react after a successful attack. You can pick an Emberstone ploy from your power discard and put it back in your hand and discard this card. It breaks itself. That has, if you particularly like some of those Emberstone ploys, which we've already said there's several. There's I don't know if we even mentioned it. There's a push. There's a guard. There's hand out a move token. Those are all great effects to be able to do more than once. And so I think this one really kind of speaks to that mastery potential here. We're like, play this well, do some really cool things.
Yeah,
absolutely. Its counterpart, the other recycler, is Reforged Aid, and this does the same thing but for an upgrade. Not as good, I don't think.
Right. Unless you're picking Forgotten Fortune up again to
Yeah,
give
right.
another move token.
And I suppose since you do get to choose when you activate these abilities, you could wait until you've burned Forgotten Fortune to be able to trigger Reforged Aid. So
yeah,
there's some potential there, I suppose, but otherwise the upgrades don't do anything. So there's certainly some opportunity cost to taking those.
Yeah. A good example of that is Call to Power, which is Brian, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so Emberstone upgrade, Surge. Immediately after a successful attack made by this fighter, you can draw 1 power card, then discard this card for it's a 1 glory upgrade. So it's a card cost to draw 1 card, so it doesn't do a whole lot other than keep your objectives flowing, I guess. So feels like a card for function, but not a spectacular effect.
Yeah, I mean, I think just thinning the deck has potential, and if there weren't so many other things going on with this deck, I could see including it just as like I want to move through my deck faster. But it's got it is burdened by the cards around it.
I will say Brightstone Vigor is interesting, just because I don't think we've seen a sort of effect previously. So Emberstone upgrade, Soothed by Slaughter, Surge immediately after a successful attack made by this fighter. If the damage characteristic of the weapon used is greater than the save characteristic of the target, you can heal the attacker, then discard this card for 2 glory. I think it's just a unique way to get heals out that we haven't seen before. I like the effect.
I do. It is fairly pricey at 2 glory, and it's kind of a partner to Armor Piercer, which is a way to sneak a damage through on a tied attack with the same sort of caveat of you need to have more damage than the save characteristic of the target. That one's substantially worse, I think, because drawn attacks are so hard to like predict whether they're going to happen or not.
Yep.
But
so it's, again, you were saying the profiles that this deck is asking for vary a lot. We were discussing a bit like what warband wants this, like what warband is statted correctly for this deck, and I feel like to a certain point it's like you're more looking for the warband to take advantage of certain aspects of the deck rather than like a warband that fits the entire deck, where like Edge of the Knife, there's 2 warbands that really jive with the tempered status. This, I don't think there's a perfect like synchronization of a warband that we've been able to find. It's more like there's a few that work better for it, and they're able to make use of more of the deck. But I think it's more that if you're like bringing big boy fighters that can do more damage than the defensive profile and make use of Armor Piercer and Brightstone Vigor, then it's like there's different aspects of the deck that become unlocked by depending on your warband choice.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think we kind of floated a bunch of different things. Skylar seems to have had some decent impact with Miari. I think he noted that he's had some good luck in the card order and the ability to score those, but maybe he's manipulating that better than I have been. I actually thought Zicket was pretty decent because they get up to 3 attack dice quite a bit, and so some of the surges they get some accuracy going. They've got decent defense. They got a variety of profiles as far as bounty goes, so they had a few things going for that, which is not something I was expecting. I will say, like, so much of the, because I played them with pure rivals. So much of the power deck was like not really doing anything for me other than trying to score the objective. And I was like, all of a sudden I was looking at Zikit's War Scroll being like, oh, cool. I can do 2 damage to my fighter just to get cleave. Like, oh man, what a great effect. Like, I'm so glad I have something that I can do.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah. I think there's a fair amount of room to experiment. It's interesting how many different, because we were like, hey, maybe Malak, hey, maybe Mayari, maybe Zikit. Like we kind of landed on a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
I was even looking at Thorns because like, oh, well, they really like a guard card and they can get into position without having any move or charge because they got the double push, so
Right, yeah.
there's all these different aspects. Like if you use this part, that's really powerful. If you double up with their, what is it, the hidden knowledge or whatever, then you've got their built-in effect. Like you can't charge off the War Scroll, and they've got hand out a move token. So I think there's a lot of room to experiment if you can endure some of the other challenges that the deck presents.
Yeah, for sure. I think the one throughput for me is that like you have to have good melee attack profiles because everything will hinge on hitting those melee attacks. So if you have low accuracy melee, or just not very interested in being in the thick of fighting, I don't know that this is going to be the deck for you.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a very, very light splash.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that light splash. Like what are you pairing with? I mean, here's the core challenge is that to do a light splash, the most you can reach into this deck, like you as we said, 9 of the objectives need Emberstone cards.
Yep.
And if they need Emberstone cards, then you need enough Emberstone cards in there so that those have some chance of scoring.
Yep.
And as soon as you've done that, you're like advancing well out of the splash arena. And well, I think we were estimating you probably want at least 8 Emberstone for a lot of those effects, which is all of a sudden, almost half your power deck.
Splash.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to be able to splash because there's some really solid cards in here. You'd have to have a deck that is really, really self-sufficient on the objectives.
Yep.
Of the 3 non-Emberstone relevant objectives, how many of them are surges or end phases?
None.
All yeah.
Okay.
So you can't. So I thought about this a lot to think, what pairing could you potentially do to use this as a splash? Because I just want the power cards for the purpose of the power cards, not because I want them for scoring. And Pillage is the perfect combo because the surges are all amazing. So you don't have to touch the surges from this deck
Pillage.
at all. In Pillage, right. So you can just completely ignore the surges from this deck, or maybe you take one, and then you're able to bring Hovel, which doesn't care about raiding at all. And then you bring Roused Violence, where you really only need to do a couple cards.
And I think you bring Realmstone Raid as well, depending on exactly how that works. We're not
we have to figure out how it works. But if we figure out that if it can be done from 2 attacks, I think you bring it. If it not, then it's harder. But like that combo gives you a lot of flexibility, I think.
Sure.
And then the other end phases from Pillage are actually pretty good. To sort
There's
of
enough
fill
that
in.
you can make it work. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you just want to splash, I think that's the pairing. Skylar was using Emberstone. On paper, I was like, this seems mad. Like, I don't know how you're gonna make this work, but he did. So he beat you, Brian, on a tie.
No, it was a true tie.
True tie.
We didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have any no fighters on feature tokens.
Okay, so I believe our game, when I played him, I was using Hexbanes, and I think he beat me, but it was also a tie, where he won on the tiebreak, I think, or it was really close either way. So it was like, okay, maybe Emberstone's better than I was giving it credit for. But it is weird because like you don't want to draw any power cards, and so then it's like one of the cool power cards from Emberstone is getting to draw equal the number of treasures you hold. So this deck certainly makes you look at the game in a different way. I if nothing else, I can say that.
Very much so. I think Skylar was having success with the paradigm shift, and then it becomes just more luck of the draw from there.
Yeah. It feels weird. But like, I think the ploys do seem good to me. I don't like if I just saw just these ploys with nothing else contextualizing them to just be like, are these ploys you would play? I would be pretty on board with a good handful of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was, I don't know how much we really talked about the Emberstone employability. I think most of the cards that have that are cards where you're sacrificing efficiency to use them during that window.
Yeah.
Above and beyond the things that it perhaps messes up for your objective scoring. But I think that's a fair trade-off. Like getting to play basically an extra card should hamper the strength of those cards. And some of them they're not all like absolute bangers, but
No.
there's enough like pretty good. Like even just something like Misstep, which is like, hey, pick an enemy fighter, give them a stagger token.
No, it's not bad.
That's fine. That can be a decent enough accuracy boost. So yeah, all kinds of stuff that are like, yeah, I'm totally fine to have that in the deck, and it's to a lesser extent the upgrades, and to a much greater extent the objectives that really make this a challenge to figure out how you're going to use it to good effect.
Yep.
Yeah, and part of that paradigm shift is like it's not the optimal time to use this ability, but because I do actually have the objective in hand that says I want to do this, you gotta. Doesn't matter how optimal it is.
Yep.
And then it's just really worse when you got to hold it in reserve until you have the objective cards in hand that want it to work. So it's like your own objective hand is your throttle that you're not necessarily in control of, and you're at the mercy of the deck draw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awkward, but I mean, Skylar was making it work. It'd be interesting to see, like, over the course of a bunch more games, where does that, bell curve of like finding the reliability of the deck, where does that sort of like midpoint land? Like, is it oftentimes you can make it reliable and then it's actually not too bad? Or is it like, man, there's a lot of times where this just clunks up and I'm, next 3, 4, or 5 cards is no Emberstone and I can't score anything.
Yeah.
But then do we think that means that this deck is really meant truly for the Crone so that they can manipulate the objective throttle?
But they can't. Well, I mean, I don't know. Do they really gain?
I don't think
fighters, though?
I don't think fighter stat wise they necessarily are like it's meant to sync up, but I think their objective manipulation does. Certainly more than anybody else can.
I mean, sure,
Yeah.
they have a mechanic that pairs somewhat well if you want to sculpt your objective deck, but like, I think you could do a lot better if you really just want to sculpt an objective deck.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, maybe that comes back to our, I think, so, at least for me and Davy, I think pretty reliably came back to this refrain of like, couldn't I just be playing a different deck to a better effect than like jumping through all these hoops? And I think it's too early to say if that's true, but you think about that, man, I don't know how much time I spent thinking about this deck. And then just got to the end and was like, would I just be better off playing something else? Very much a fun thought experiment. I think this maybe is one of those decks where like it truly is mastery to this extent that like, I don't think you ever hand this to a beginner player and are just like, hey, this will be fun.
Yeah, that would be rough.
No.
Like, please, anyone who is getting into the game or has a friend who's getting into the game, steer them well away from this deck because I think it is a lot to have to just wrap your mind around. And if you're like just trying to learn the basic mechanics of the game, this is going to get in your way a lot. So
Concur.
Probably the biggest negative aspect of the deck is that it is not new player friendly.
Mm-hmm.
At least it's sold separately and not in a core box.
True. Maybe that's actually something to bring up. Like, so we now have 4 mastery decks. Is that true? Or 3?
For some reason I thought it was 3.
Cataclysm, Edge,
Rack and Ruins Mastery.
Rack and Ruin, and Realmstone.
I think Edge is Flex. Edge has a.
Oh, is Edge Flex?
I think Edge is Flex, and then but it's got a plot card.
Okay, all right. I don't see how Edge is Flex, but anyway. But still, that means we have a lot of mastery decks just floating around there now. I don't know. For a new edition, I was kind of expecting like mostly like aggro and hold decks, and then like a sprinkling of the other flavors. But it's kind of been the complete opposite.
Yeah,
it's kind of a weird thing to have for the start of a new edition.
Facts. Well, I think that's gonna start to wrap it up for us here. We want to go kind of once more around. Any final thoughts about? We'll say Realmstone Raiders at first.
Well, if you ever, I don't think it is at all, but if you ever thought that Underworlds was solved and the meta was stale, Realmstone Raiders is definitely going to like offer you a challenge to prestige on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If you want a challenge, here you go.
I think I'm going to roll up to a table sometime and somebody's going to be like, yeah, I have Realmstone in my pairing. And I'm like, all right. And they're like, time for the easy W. And then somebody's
smashed.
Like,
here's where I get completely turned upside down and suplexed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I it is one of those decks where it's just like, is this just a challenge? Is this just like them being like, all right, players who've played this game for years and years and years, here's your toy to go figure out like what you can do in this game. Yeah. I'll say it's got me intrigued. I have no idea if it's any good. I will probably try playing with it some just because I think we're going to need more reps to understand it, but it's a weird one.
Yeah, that is true. I think it's got individually powerful cards. I think the idea of cycling through your deck feels good. But I think the execution, I think I said this to somebody in our group chat. I think it feels like there was some version of this that was more powerful and they're like, uh-oh, and then made a change to back it down.
For sure.
Just because, any pairing, you just... the fact that something, if it's not Emberstone, has to get sent to the bottom is a bumper. Like Emberstone already has a little bit of a bump where that they are one, important for your objectives, and then two, have the Emberstone Ploy or Emberstone upgrade ability so they can play out. Like that always feels like, hey, there's the bump for having Emberstone, but then for non-Emberstone to also be forced to the bottom of the deck feels like, well, the ability to kind of manipulate through my deck is really hampered by I just don't have as much agency there, I guess. Yeah. But again, like we've talked about, it seems like Skylar had a better grasp of how to maybe leverage that. But it just does weird things to you. Like I had one opening hand that was like, well, I would hang on to this opening hand, but in my Nemesis pairing, I have 8 Emberstone power cards, and I have 4 of them in my hand right now, which means that there's a whole bunch of my objective deck is not going to score. So I guess I'm gonna mulligan these 4 ploys. I think it was like or whatever it is, this strong hand, because it's just like, here's yet another layer that I got to consider. So I think I've got some frustration with that. We mentioned like the naming is kind of weird, which is perhaps petty, but it's also important at a glance to maybe have an idea of what a card is going to do.
Yep.
And then I would say maybe almost my most frustrating thing with it is like the bookkeeping on a lot of the cards. I think is just like some, maybe the execution of the raid ability is like not quite nailed, but I feel like this bookkeeping is just kind of bad design. Like it's frustrating in a way that I think they can do better.
Yeah, it leads to sort of a what I don't know the right words, but like there's so many opportunities for misplays that are not intentional, where then you get to the end and you're like, I think I scored this, and then your opponent's just going to have to be like,
I
now
guess
what do I do? Right?
And
Because it's
for me, it was like, hey, I'm in an uncertain game state. I guess I'm just going to assume I don't score this, right?
Which
like,
you would hope that most people would be like, if I'm not sure, I'm going to say I didn't. But there's going to be plenty of people who think through it and go, yeah, I think I did this. And then you as an opponent can't really validate because were you able to, like, if you as an opponent are seeing your, the person with this deck be like, I think so. It's like, oh man, what are the chances that I was keeping track well enough to be able to confirm? So,
right.
It puts people in an awkward spot, especially in a competitive scenario where like the difference of scoring something could be the difference between winning a tournament or not. So, hopefully no judge calls have to get made about it.
Work on your card counting skills.
Or like I said, just make your opponent have to take notes, because like, to be honest, I think that would be the only way in a tournament setting I'd feel comfortable to say 100% this did or did not happen, so that you took notes. And that's going to slow the game down. And the games have already been getting slower as the game gets more complicated. So,
and historically, we've said like note taking is not,
not allowed, right?
Yeah.
But this deck almost requires it. So, bit clunky there. Well, any other final thoughts on the knives before we close this episode out?
I'm excited. They're fun. Yeah. I do like the models. I do like the mechanic. I'll be curious to see just how punchy they can be, but you got to strike first on them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I think you have to be willing to take a few L's when you just don't land those early hits and your fighters don't inspire and you're kind of stuck on your one dodge and just getting socked in the head. So, but I think there's enough interesting there, and I think that the objective deck manipulation is particularly has potential to be pretty fun.
Yep.
I'm going to start building the greediest blazing edge of the knife deck.
I look forward to it. I look forward to you mulliganing into.
I'm not saying it's going to be good. I'm just saying, like, I'm going to do it.
All right.
Should be fun.
All right. Well, I think we're going to look to wrap up here. You can get in touch with us, whatthehexcast@gmail.com, or just come chat with us on the Discord. People are doing it all the time. It's been great to see people filter in. Even we'll have kind of long time listeners that I finally decided to figure out what Discord was. Like, welcome, fellow Luddite. And so it's always really cool, and it's cool to hear from folks who have been listening for a long time, and we appreciate that. It's kind of a good place to chat with everybody. As far as other content, we are of course part of the Mortal Realms network, and so the mortalrealms.com, that's going to have all the blog entries, again, a card by card review of the war scrolls and fighters for Knives of the Crone and of the Realmstone Raiders deck, if you want a blow-by-blow or just have this in a different context. Coming up, what we're going to cover, TBD. We got to slot this one in as a new release, so imagine we got a little bit before we get another one of those. So hope maybe we'll have some play experience. We can kind of come back with some more once it's in the wild experience with these releases, and hopefully over the next few weeks and months, we'll have some reports back from our Canadian escapades. Some of our locals surging up there, trying to make some stuff happen.
Yeah, I think this episode should be releasing while we're playing in that, so maybe we'll have a recap.
Yeah. Okay, great. Gentlemen, you know what time it is.
Absolutely.
You don't need the hint that this is going to be from Realmstone Raiders, which is going to make it perhaps extra challenging. This one is unattributed.
Oh, boy.
In the mines beneath Emberguard, losing your enemies is one thing. It's entirely another to avoid ending up lost yourself.
I've probably read this one more than any other card in the deck, and I know exactly what it is. I'll wait to see if Brian knows.
I'm going to guess it's the domain with the Raiders Raptor? No.
That's a good guess, but Phil, do you have it?
Hidden knowledge.
It is, and my idea here is that perhaps getting the most out of
Hidden
this
from us.
is hidden knowledge. Yeah. As down as we've been, I was also not wild about I think Countdown when I first read it, and it's obviously like one of the best pairings out there for many people. So there's every possibility that I am wrong about this, and I'd be happy if that was the case.
Absolutely.
We do have. I'm going to dad joke this recommended listening here. We
Don't you always?
This is, your recommended listening is Knives Out from Radiohead.
Okay.
Hey. And I think that I'm going to embarrass myself. I think that's off of Amnesiac. But that's it for What the Hex. I've been Davey.
I've been Phil.
I've been Brian.
And most of the time,
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
Sorry. You were on a train, so I thought you had reached it, but go ahead. See more Realmstone. Like he wanted to only be seeing objectives through raiding, if that makes sense. And
Power cards?
it was. I'm getting. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I keep getting absolutely switched up with this deck.
That's totally fair.
Let me rephrase that because it did sound a lot like objectives there.